Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan. Good morning, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Lisa Angelia, and I'm from Fiscal Policy Agency, Ministry of Finance, Republic of Indonesia, and I will be hosting the event today. On behalf of the organizers, I would like to thank each and every one of the guests and participants today for giving your honored presence to the second day of the international webinar on designing the optimum ecosystem of pension. That this event is still part of a series of events to commemorate the 74th Indonesian Uang Day. But before we jump into our main event today, I would like to read out the following rules for all participants of this Zoom webinar and also participants who join via our YouTube channel. So first, Zoom meeting will be logged at 9:30 a.m. Jakarta time or UTC +7, or once the capacity is fulfilled. So if participants are late or incidentally leave the Zoom meeting, please follow our discussion through our YouTube channel. And participants are welcome to raise questions during the panel discussion session by writing down the question in the chat box below for participants who join via our Zoom meeting, or through the live comment section for participants who join via our YouTube channel. And you can propose your question or write down your question in Bahasa Indonesia or in English, whichever you're comfortable with. And later on, our moderator will read the questions to our panelists during the Q&A session. I would also like to remind that only Indonesian participants are eligible to get the e-certificate. So if I would like to read out the following rules for the e-certificate in Bahasa Indonesia. So please allow me. Bagi peserta yang belum melakukan registrasi, dimohon untuk dapat melakukan registrasi pada link yang telah disediakan. Kemudian e-sertifikat akan diberikan kepada peserta yang melakukan registrasi, baik yang bergabung melalui Zoom maupun kanal YouTube Kemenkeu, setelah mengisi tautan kuesioner yang akan dibagikan pada seminar hari kedua. Jadi selama acara berlangsung nanti, tautan untuk kuesioner akan dibagikan. Kemudian panitia berhak untuk tidak memberikan e-sertifikat bagi peserta yang tidak memenuhi persyaratan di atas. Jadi pastikan Anda telah melakukan registrasi dan juga telah mengisi tautan kuesioner yang akan dibagikan kemudian. So, ladies and gentlemen, on the first day, we have already discussed the matters relating to how to build a just and financially sustainable pension system. And we also explored the challenges and opportunities to set a well-designed pension system that balances the affordability of the financing and also the adequacy of the benefits and also the sustainability of the pension program itself. And today, we are going to have a discussion on the management of pension fund. But ladies and gentlemen, before we jump into our main event of the panel discussion, we will hear an opening remarks, which will be delivered by the Director General of Budget, Ministry of Finance, Republic of Indonesia, Bapak Asqalani. Good morning, Bapak Asqalani.
Good morning.
Bapak Asqalani, yes.
Yeah, good morning, thank you.
Please.
Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan, salam sejahtera pada kita semua. Good morning, my be upon us all. Distinguished speakers, panelists, ladies and gentlemen, let me begin by thanking the panelists and the participants for this fruitful and constructive webinar. I am very confident that at the end of the webinar series, the capacities and knowledge of various parties dealing with the pension issues will be even more solid. The pension system must be viewed as a whole, bearing in mind the impact of pension reform on macroeconomic, employment welfare, and also financial deepening. Today, in the second day of the international webinar of designing the optimum ecosystem of pension, yesterday, I think we already got the message from the Vice Minister of Finance of Indonesia, also from Ministry of Finance. And yesterday we explored the issue of a just and financial sustainable pension system and understood the important features of mentioned system are sustainability of the state budget, efficiency of economy, and also social justice. We also have gathered a new insight and knowledge on the issue that is very useful for us. Nevertheless, a sustainable pension system requires another vital element, which is appropriate management of pension fund, one that is done prudently with good governance and in accordance with international best practice. This important issue is what we are going to discuss in more detail today. Ladies and gentlemen, although there have been a continuous growth in pension fund industry assets from IDR around 561 trillion in 2014 and to IDR 834 trillion in 2017, pension funds have not played a major role in development of the financial sector in Indonesia. Banking system still dominate the financial sector in Indonesia with a portion of 78%, while pension fund is only around 2.5% of total financial sector asset. The size of our pension fund industry, as shown by total asset of pension fund to GDP, is also still far below peer countries, such as other Asian 5 countries. This data indicates that there is still a lot of room for growth for pension fund in Indonesia. So that's why I think we are very open to get a sharing session from the panelists and also from all the audience how to promote and also make a design of the pension fund of Indonesia for the future. As I mentioned before, to reach its full potential, pension funds have to be managed well and prudently. This is an area that can be improved in Indonesia. For example, pension fund managers in Indonesia tend to place their assets in short tenor investment instruments with low volatility and low returns. This practice is not accordant with the characteristic of pension program that has long-term liabilities resulting in asset liability mismatch. It is also vital to ensure that the management of pension fund is accompanied and with good governance, particularly to increase trust in the pension fund industry. Proper investment governance, effective risk management, adequate transparency and accountability, and strong supervision are some of the characteristics of good governance that we need to establish in the industry. Furthermore, we need to make sure that pension fund management in Indonesia is in line with international best practice. In this context, we can utilize knowledge sharing from other countries' regulators and experts, such as today sharing of pattern of pension management in Iran and Thailand, which is, I'm sure, will be very beneficial for us. We all agree the pension fund is significantly important not only to boost sustainable economic growth and promote the financial sector deepening, but also, most importantly, to provide retirement protection for all Indonesian people in their senior age. However, it is increasingly important to create a robust management of pension fund as it is a preliminary requirement for a mature and inclusive pension system. The management of pension funds should be also effectively designed and implemented by all relevant institutions and supported by all citizens. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to emphasize once again that a good pension design is one that strikes a balance between adequate benefit, affordable financing, and a sustainable program. This is what we envision our pension system would be, hopefully, in the near future. Last but not least, I would like to convey my appreciation to all speakers and participants for joining this important discussion. Have a good discussion and thank you for all of you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you so much. Terima kasih Pak Aswani for the mind-opening keynote speech. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we are continuing to our next, and therefore our main agenda today, that is the panel discussion. I hope you're still as excited to hear what our prominent speakers say about the issues of managing pension fund, because yesterday we have 5,500 views on YouTube. So I hope the enthusiasm still keep be maintained to today's issue. So there will be three panelists joining us today. So the first we have Bapak Isa Rahmatarwata. He is the Director General of State Asset Management, Ministry of Finance, Republic of Indonesia. And the second we have Ms. Professor Murawet Suwanrada from Chulalongkorn University, Thailand. And then the third, we have Dr. Michael Azimi. He's the CEO and member of the board of Sabah Pension Strategies Institute from Iran. And the panel discussion will be led by our moderator today, Bapak Adi Budiarso, head of the Center for Financial Sector Policy, Fiscal Policy Agency, Ministry of Finance, Republic of Indonesia. Bapak Adi Budiarso obtained the professional doctorate in business administration, University of Canberra in 2014. He has held various executive positions managing cross-functional initiatives at Ministry of Finance since 2014. And recently, he was appointed head of Center for Financial Sector Policy after previously serving as head of Center for Climate Change and Multilateral Policy. Good morning, Bapak Adi. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Selamat pagi, Pak Adi.
Selamat pagi, Mbak.
You are welcome to take over this platform now, Pak.
Thank you so much. Very good morning to all of us. Excellencies, Eselon 1 of Ministry of Finance, distinguished panelists. Today we have a very specific moment because this is the second day of the International webinar in the pension system. We would like to improve the ecosystem of the pension and the capability of the pension in order to broaden the scope, the participation, but also the deepening of the financial sector in Indonesia. We'd like to listen to the very expert, knowledgeable panelists today, as we already know each other. First, we would like to listen from the Director General of State Asset Management, Bapak Isa, and then the second from the Professor Murawet from Chulalongkorn University, and the third will be Dr. Azimi from Iran, the expert practitioner in pension system in Iran. First of all, I would like to introduce Mr. Isa Rahmatarwata. He is really, actually the guru, if I may call it. But Isa laid the foundation of the insurance pension system in the past, and now he's very knowledgeable and expert in the Ministry of Finance, and we'd like to listen from him, basically on how to improve and how to manage and mitigate, leading towards the transformation of the management of the pension in Indonesia. Dr. Bapak Isa Rahmatarwata, please, Pak.
Thank you, Pak Adi. Very good morning to all of us. First of all, I would like to thank the organizing committee for inviting me to speak in this very prestigious webinar. And of course, I would also like to thank Pak Adi for your very kind introduction. Well, I was with the pension supervisory body in, I think, before 2006. And so it was a long time ago. So I would not claim myself that I am now very knowledgeable about pension at all, actually, Pak Adi. But thanks anyway, because now the minister asked me to join in a group of persons that will review and perhaps also revitalize our pension system in Indonesia. So I would love to hear from other speakers as well this morning to learn about the development of pension in international scenes. as that would very useful for me as well as for others to review and to develop better pension schemes and pension arrangements in Indonesia. So thanks again, and bear with me to listen to my presentation. We can start my presentation, please. I would start my presentation with the things that Pak Askolani just mentioned, that pension is really, really important for the development of a country, including Indonesia. And we need to pay attention on how we will grow our pension so that it will be as useful as what we expect for the development of the country. As we can see in my first slide here, that pension fund is an intermediary, an important intermediary from the providers of funds, including households, corporations, governments, to users of funds. This can be the long-term investment, including infrastructure, commercial real estate, property, and other sectors that need funds to develop the sector. So pension, together with banks, insurance companies, asset managers, would be a perfect intermediary for between two parties, one that provide funds and the other one that needs funds. In Indonesia, I would like to emphasize just one sector, that is infrastructure. We estimate the fund needed to develop our infrastructure in the country would be around 6,445 trillion rupiah that will be used between 2020 and 2024. And under our estimation, the government estimation, the state budget may provide around 37% of the needs, the fund needs. The state-owned enterprise can leverage and can provide 21% of the needs, and the private sector, we expect to provide 42% of the needs. That equivalent to around 2,700 trillion rupiah. Of course, insurance and pension will be the important player that we expect to participate in the provision of these funds from the private sector. Let us see the available funds that is now managed by pension funds in Indonesia. We have mandatory pension funds that are managed by three entities. They are BPJS Ketenagakerjaan, and then this is for private employees. And then we have TASPEN that manages pension for civil servants, and ASABRI that manages pension for armed forces and police officers. These three are the mandatory pension organizers. And then we also have some voluntary pension administrators that include employer pension funds here under the ATPI. ATPI is actually the name of the association of these employer pension funds. And also we also have financial institution pension funds. Here we put the symbol of the association of EPLK. All assets managed by these five types of institutions amount to 955 trillion rupiah. So this is, of course, still far from the expected contribution from the private sector. Well, if in other countries, pension provides perhaps the majority funds from the private sector, not in Indonesia. We are still in the in the lower end of the amount that can be contributed by the private sector. This will need some changes because we like to have pension to be more contributive to our development. Next slide, please. Okay. As mentioned also by Pak Askolani in the opening of his speech, that pension fund in Indonesia now contribute very low contribution to the GDP. It accounts for 6.03% of the GDP of Indonesia at this moment. If we compare it to other countries, say for example Canada, Australia, Chile, even our neighbor country Malaysia, this is still far, far below. In Canada, the pension assets contribute up to 154% of the GDP. Malaysia, our neighbor, contribute around 60% of the GDP. So pension becomes very important contributors for development funds in the country. So we also want to have the same thing here in Indonesia. Let us see the next graph, the right-hand side graph. We put here 3 scenarios. If we do nothing to change the practice of pension administration, pension management, then we will not be able to achieve the percentage of GDP as high as what we see in other countries. For example, in Malaysia. We estimate that if we do nothing, then in 2045, by the way, that would be 100 years of this country, we will only have 30% of GDP as a pension assets. That only double the current percentage. We don't like to see that. We like to see pension assets grow much faster, and by 2045, we have at least the same percentage as what we see now in Malaysia and in other neighboring countries. So we do some calculations, some projections, some simulation, and based on the Prospera works, we see that if we can create or we can cause the inflows of new money to our assets, to our pension assets of the rate 2.5% of GDP, and then if we are using the estimated rate of return 5.55%, then we will achieve this 60% level of GDP in 2045. If we increase the estimation of rate of return to 7%, then we may need only 2.08% of GDP inflow to the pension assets to achieve the same level by 2045. This is a very, very high figures for inflows as well as for rate of return. So we really need to do something structurally to make this happen. This is something that we like to see in the near future. This is also what we are now working on. And let me touch some aspects on this issue in the several slides after this. Next slide, please. Okay, we identified some reasons why we cannot grow our pension as faster as in other countries. One that we identify is lack of transparency. This have created some hesitance to the prospective participants, or even among the participants, about the future of our pension. This have give them hesitation to contribute more or to accumulate more through the pension scheme. Second is that our performance of investment, pension investment. We believe that some optimization, some improvement can be done in this area so that participants especially, will give more attention and give more favor for saving their money in the pension scheme rather than in other schemes. Third, we also see that in our defined benefit system that becomes our tradition within the civil service environment, in the armed forces and police officers environment, we implement defined benefit. We also have some kind of defined benefit for private sector employees that is managed by BPJS Ketenagakerjaan. We see that in the long run, our contribution is not really sufficient to cover the benefit that is promised under the current regulations. This is also something that has been noticed by many parties and has been proposed for some improvement in this level of contributions. Of course, we also recognize that even with the current system, the benefit itself is not considered adequate or fair for the participants. This is also this was also mentioned by Pak Askolani in his speech. So this is something that is identified, that is we believe is important to revise and not only to make the flow to pension assets bigger, but also to make pension as fair and an adequate provision for future income of the people in the country. So this eventually also creates some attraction for the prospective participants in the future, because they becomes convinced that pension will provide them some goodness when they retire in the long run. There are two other factors that we believe also affect the growth of pension assets in Indonesia. Especially this is true for private pensions as well as for BPJS Ketenagakerjaan. We see that in the BPJS Ketenagakerjaan, there is a regulation that allows for early withdrawal, very early withdrawal. Even participants with a few years below 2 years of participants may withdraw his funds in that is managed by BPJS Ketenagakerjaan. This creates some early withdrawal from the funds, and that creates the funds cannot grow as fast as what we expected. And second is that restrictions on investment portfolio. This is something that perhaps originated from the needs for prudent management of pension assets, but then the imposition of these regulations that are dragging through time makes the pension managers have some limitations on investment, on selecting the investment. This, of course, will lead to the choice become limited, and the venture by pension managers to achieve higher return, of course with higher risk, is very restricted. So this is again something that we need to consider to review for more aggressive yet prudent management of pension assets. Next slide, please. Let me focus on three things in the next slide. I'm especially interested in providing more information on the situation in Indonesia about the lack of transparency, and then less optimized investment of pension assets, and perhaps also inadequate contribution to cover benefit in the long run. These three aspects I would simply address with three probable solutions. Of course, they seems like obvious, but we like to see the detail in the next slide that may invite comments and also interesting questions later on from the participants. And I would love to hear that as a feedback, because we are working on these three issues to revise our pension system in Indonesia. These three, of course, strengthening our transparency regime, and then how we optimize the investment through the option of perfect strategy. And then we are discussing currently about notional defined contributions as an alternative to our traditional defined benefit that has been practiced years and years, and now we realize that creates some potential burden in the future. Let's move to the next slide. This is about transparency. There are several issues that are considered transparency issues in Indonesia. The first thing is about the disclosure of the return of pension assets. Not all participants understand that their pension assets are really invested, and then the investment results in a certain rate of return. BPJS Ketenagakerjaan perhaps is the one that provides individual access to this kind of information, although perhaps the level of information, the quality of information is also still limited. For example, most of funds did not really completely disclose what the rate of return that is acquired by the funds in the previous years, for example, in the current period, for example. BPJS Ketenagakerjaan, for example, disclose only the realized return. We don't know, the participants don't know what are the unrealized loss or gain from the management of assets. Second, this is also about the practice, the international best practice implementation in our management. This is also something that we like to see actually, but as most of us have very limited access to some standards, we cannot really compare what is the best practice that we should see actually in the management of our assets. So perhaps some disclosure also needs to be seen in this area. And then of course the performance of the funds. One thing is about the disclosure of the return, but in general the measurement of the performance, the cost and benefits analysis is also lacking. And actually, if we can have more information on this issue, perhaps you can give more appreciation to the management of pension assets. Of course, the report of high-risk instruments is also very limited, and as a result, we once in a while we were surprised by the issue about the underperformance of asset, or even some potential mismanagement in one of the funds that we actually would love to see earlier than the case, one or two cases that we experienced so far. Of course, this would like to be changed, and we want to ensure more transparent system, and there are 4 things here that we can list here. That evidence-based policy should be in place, and this should be communicated with the stakeholders, and then program and financial reports should be made available to public, and of course some educations for reading this program and financial reports would be necessary as well, because if reports are available but no one can read, of course that also not be useful. And then the reporting should be done more frequently, so that we can have more feeling about the performance of our pension assets, and then again the education and socialization of the pension scheme, and also pension administration, pension management is also important for participants as well as other workers to give appreciation to the pension management. We have take some benchmarking from other countries, and we do not see only pension administration, but we also saw some practices by the other fund managers that we believe provide similar services to pension funds. Next slide, please. This is about the strategy for investment portfolio of pension assets, and we see that the current system is equipped with quite strict requirements, quite strict regulations on investment. This is something that in one side is beneficial to guard the pension, so that is very safe. But on the other side, this also creates some minimum performance of the funds. And I think we should reconsider this approach, and we perhaps have to provide more trust to the managers. Of course, this will also need the selection of the managers even better than before, because we will trust the management of the assets to the managers, and would like to see the managers enter more opportunistic strategy for the pension, so that it can grow, and then it can provide with better rate of return, of course with the commensurate risk. So the risk, of course, should be managed in balance with the need to see a better rate of return. So 2 things that we see important is to set target on rate of return. This is something that should be more explicit and should be more specific, directed by the sponsors of the funds, including the governments for the civil service pension, as well as the armed forces and police officers pensions. So this is one thing. And the second thing, we perhaps have to have a decision on the past investment that is not performing very well. Some investment we saw that really in an idle situation. We don't know whether we can expect better results in the future. So for this kind of part of assets, we believe we have to be wiser and braver to do some cut loss, and then can utilize the remaining funds that can be saved or that can be secured to invest in other and more productive type of investment. Okay, then the next slide on the program. On the program, we've been noticing that the defined benefit that we are currently implementing for civil service and members of armed forces, police officers, are putting us on a difficult situation. On the one side, this defined benefit is not really providing a sufficient benefit for the participants. More and more phenomenons we notice that the pension benefits really paid to the retirees is really cannot catching up with the inflation and the price that is currently happening in the economy. Perhaps when they contribute quite reasonably, and that is really sufficient for that moment. But as time goes by, and then we for some time in the past, we did not really provide some cost of living adjustment for the notice. Only lately the government provides some cost of living adjustments to the pension benefits, and this still cannot provide the deficit, cannot fulfill the deficiency that was created from the non-existence of cost of living adjustment in the past. So as a result, many retirees are receiving pension benefits very low, and even for the next retirees, we believe they will still experience similar things, that their benefit is not really comparable to the income they received prior to the retirement. So we used to call it as a replacement ratio. The replacement ratio is very low. But on the other hand, as we so far we implement this defined benefit on a pay-as-you-go basis, then we see that the needs of funds to suffice the liability actually growing more and more theoretically and actuarially actually, and we have not set aside sufficient funds to fulfill that needs actually. So there has been some discrepancy between the fund needed according to the standard of accounting, the standard of good practices in providing pension, and the real funds that are already accumulated. So this is something that we need to address. These two things. One, to provide equitable and more reasonable benefit. Second, to have the the financing of the funds become more sustainable. So we have been working on this issue for several years, and we need to conclude in the next few months. Actually, at least I expect that we can conclude in the next several months. One of the alternative scheme that we've been discussing is a notional defined contribution. This is a defined contribution that provides some sort of guaranteed rate of return for the participants. So this is really a hybrid between defined contribution and defined benefit, and we see some good things in this type of program. Although we also make reservation of this program due to some aspects. And of course, I would like to hear other experts to comment on this option that of course we cannot claim now is the best one, but we are really interested in this one. So in short, we are now reviewing our pension program, especially for the civil servants and members of the armed forces, to provide equitable and more reasonable level of benefit to participants, as well as to sustain the program financing, program funding, so that we will not have future problems with this pension program. Next slide, please. Well, this is really perhaps specific for Indonesia. At this time, as I mentioned earlier, that we have BPJS Ketenagakerjaan administering pension and old age savings for private sectors. We have ASPEN for administering our pension program for civil servants, and ASABRI for members of armed forces and police. Now, for the members of the armed forces and the civil servants, we are also reviewing the governance and more specifically the institutional arrangement for management of the program. And so far, we are looking at three options. First, of course, the existing one is managed by state-owned enterprise. The state-owned enterprise becomes like a trustee of the funds and also the administrator of the pension program. So if we choose this, then this will be no change in the system. But perhaps we can still improve or make some improvement on the management, on the arrangement, on the governance, so that some efficiency can be expected, and as well as some effectiveness of the program can be expected from the same state-owned enterprise, but with different or with the modernized corporate governance. And then the second is perhaps we want to create some special institution, what we call as a sui generis institution. But of course, this will need more or higher level of regulations. In my understanding, a special entity that is specifically described, the government is specifically described, should be put in a law, or so this will take some time to establish a draft law, and then to discuss it with the parliament, and later to create more implementing regulations. And then the third alternative that we've been thinking is to put it under one of the units in one of the ministry, for example, Ministry of Finance, to administer the funds, to manage the funds. But this also have some disadvantage. That because this will fall under the civil, under the rules and regulations of public asset management, and this normally creates some difficulties, some inflexibilities that needs to be addressed actually with the current system. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think this is my slide, and perhaps the last slide. Yeah. Okay. This is the summary of what I just explained. That first, the management of pension asset in Indonesia should be improved to book faster growth and support national development. Some fundamental changes needs to be done actually in the management of pension. Second, the governance, in particular transparency, should be enhanced to attract people on the scheme and to give them some confidence that the scheme is managed well. And the third is some redesign of the program and institutional arrangement perhaps should be also considered to see the implementation of the program and the management of the assets is more effective and efficient. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your patience to follow my presentation, and I'll give the floor back to Pak Adi Budiarso. Thank you.
Really appreciate highly your presentation. You have been, just using less than 1 hour, Pak, to explain really complex issues, Pak. Thank you so much. I think this is really signifies the importance of the program of pension in Indonesia, but also in line with the keynote speaker, Bapak Askolani, that mentioned the pension fund is actually also the sustainable source of the investment and sustainable source of the growth in Indonesia. And one among other things that we noted, Bapak, is on the exploration about the current states of the Indonesian management of the pension, which is the challenges, also the room for improvement. Now, I would like to introduce our second panelist, Professor Worawet Suwanrada. He is the professor from Chulalongkorn University, Thailand. He works as the professor of economics in the Faculty of Economics, Chulalongkorn University, Thailand. And in 2019, he was awarded as National Distinguished Researcher in Economics. And he also published research in various journals since 2007 until now. He is really experienced in governmental service, such as Ministry of Finance and National Order Pension Commissions. I think to complete our understanding in the macro perspective, also in the national perspective and the global perspective, I would like to invite Professor Worawet. Please, Professor. I think you still unmute. Please unmute.
Okay. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, everyone. Greeting from Bangkok, Thailand. First of all, I would like to express my thanks to Fiscal Policy Office, Ministry of Finance, Republic of Indonesia for inviting me to this distinguished international webinar, designing the optimum ecosystem of pension. Today, I would like to focus my presentation not only on the pension fund issue, but I would like to share with you about the experiences of pension reform in Thailand and the entire picture of current system by emphasizing on its strengths and limitations. I hope it will be more or less useful for Indonesian pension reform in the future. Next slide. This slide, please, Tiba. Because of time limits, I would like to focus on only 3 points respectively. Firstly, I will show you the entire picture of the current pension systems in Thailand briefly. And secondly, I would like to explore about the strengths and limitations of current system. And finally, I would like to provide some information on my views about the direction of pension reform and lesson learned from Thai pension system. Next slide, please. Firstly, I would like to talk about the current pension system in Thailand briefly. This slide shows the entire picture of current Thai pension system by schemes. You can confirm the fact that we have a lot of pension system at the same time, and each scheme cover different target groups. For example, if you see the old age allowance system, the target group of this system is the population age of 60 plus who does not receive government officials, who did not receive government official pension or did not receive any salary from the public sector. And at the same time, we also have 4 systems like the government official pension, local authority official pension fund, Bangkok Metropolitan Authority official pension, and government pension fund that cover central, regional, and local government officials. And we also have the so-called the Social Security Fund that cover private sector's employee. And of course, some private sector's employee will be provided provident fund from their employers. And we also have the so-called National Saving Fund Scheme that provides pension, which is a national contribution system for working population, especially in informal sector. You can see we have different pension system, and all system has been regulated by different committees. It's something like laissez-faire in Thai pension system. Next slide, please. And those 9 pension systems are also different by financing methods. You can see that these 4 schemes, pension source of fund is from central government budget or local government budget. Or in other words, these 4 systems are traditional defined benefit system. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah. We also have these 2 systems which adopt the social insurance concept, namely the beneficiaries, the government, and the employer will co-contribute in the fund. The example of the pension system that adopt social insurance concept are Social Security Fund and Ministry of Education mutual fund that focus on private school teachers and personnel. Next slide, please. And the government pension fund, national saving fund, and the provident fund are financed in forms of a saving scheme. The government pension fund is compulsory for central and regional government officials who have served as government officials after March 1997. But the national saving fund and provident fund for private employee are still voluntary systems. Next slide, please. Okay, if we put all schemes that I have mentioned together and take into an account the fact that one Thai population has the opportunity to associate and enjoy benefits from multiple schemes at one time. So we can conclude that 9 system into this one picture. So if you consider Thai pension system, more or less it looks like, I don't know that in Indonesia you have this kind of utensil or not, but it looks like the so-called multi-layers lunchbox system. Some may have many layers of lunchbox, like a private employee. They are eligible for OH allowance, Social Security funds, OH benefits, and at the same time, if their employers provide provident fund, they can enjoy the benefits from provident fund as well. In case the central and regional government officials who served the government officials after March 1997, they can enjoy 2 tiers of pension. The first one is traditional one, and the second tier is government pension fund, which is the you have like a saving account of your own. And for informal sector, working population, you are eligible for OH allowance after you become 60 years of age. If you apply for voluntarily National Saving Fund scheme membership, you can get extra pension from National Saving Fund scheme. So if you consider 60 million of Thai population, some has only 1 layer pension system, but some has 2 layers, but some have 3 layers pension system. But we can say that at least Thai older population age of 60 plus will have at least 1 pension scheme to guarantee their OH income security from government official pension or OH allowance. Next slide, please. However, before 2009, we had the entire system, which was comprised of occupational labor status-based pension schemes and targeting OH allowance system, which was quite different from current picture. Thailand still had no universality of protection for OH basic income guarantee before 2009, and of course at the same time, Thailand still had no specific pension schemes which cover informal sectors or self-employed person like farmers, taxi driver, motorcycle taxi driver, or housewife. That groups has not been covered in any pension system before 2009, and only the unprivileged older person who has been targeted were eligible for the OH allowance system. The OH allowance system has been launched in 1993 under the Department of Public Assistance, Ministry of Interior. The objective of the scheme is to provide financial assistance to the unprivileged, elderly only, but not for all older person. Next slide, please. But after 2009, the landscape of Thai pension system has drastically changed. In 2009, because there were many weak points in our targeting system for targeting the recipients of OH allowance. So finally, the OH allowance system has been changed to providing to only unprivileged older person. It has been universalized to all Thai population at age of 60 and over, except one who are receiving government officials pension or salary from the government. I beg your pardon. You may have to revise this slide because I made the paste and copy wrongly. The words OH allowance in the parentheses should not be still targeting system, but it should revise to universalized. I would like to apologize for that mistake. And in 2 years later, in 2011, the new scheme for non-employee working population namely the National Saving Fund scheme, has been introduced into the whole system. But unfortunately, it was not compulsory. It's still voluntary for informal sector. So from 2011, working population in informal sector are able to associate to public pension system at the first time. And I would like to, next slide, please. I would like to give you some more information about the National Saving Fund scheme a little bit. The National Saving Fund scheme is a contributory system, and the member of the fund must contribute a defined amount of payment to the fund monthly, 50 baht or 100 baht per month. And the government will co-contribute in addition to individuals' monthly contribution as well. And the co-contribution rate of the government depends on the age of the member. And of course, everyone has his or her own individual account. And the National Saving Fund and the National Saving Fund will, has an obligation to manage the members' individual accounts to attain high return, which will be currently at a certain rate that will be calculated from 4 big commercial banks in Thailand. Thailand's interest rate. And the benefits of National Saving Fund scheme, the member can attain pension that calculate from the amount of money in the individual account, and they will get that amount of money until the end of the life. Of course, if the money is not enough, government will partially subsidize into the accounts as well. And not only the fixed amount that member can save every month, but the member can contribute more than 100 Thai baht per month, but not exceed 1,100 baht. But this amount of additional saving will not be co-contributed by the government. This is the scheme for the informal sector. Next slide, please. Based on the entire picture of Thai pension system, I would like to show you some strengths and limitations of current system. For the sake of pension reform in 2009 and 2011, nowadays Thai pension system can achieve the so-called the universality of protection for basic income for older person under 2 systems, as I mentioned before, namely old age allowance scheme and the government official scheme. So if you are 60 plus, a Thai citizen, and you have a clear registration for your house, so you are, and of course you are not government officials, pension recipients, and you are not working for government organization and get salary every month, you are fully eligible for old age allowance. You just go to the local authority office and apply for that. Now, approximately 90% of older population of age 60 and plus are receiving old age allowance or government officials. That's why I call we can achieve the universality of protection for old age basic income. Next slide, please. And moreover, we expect the National Saving Fund that I mentioned before to expand the coverage of the second layer pension to working population, especially in informal sector, as much as possible. Because as you see in this slide, for private sector's employee, they can get old age benefits from Social Security Fund as the second layers pension. Central government or regional government officials can enjoying the additional pension benefits from government pension fund. And of course, if you are self-employed, you have to apply for National Saving Fund scheme, which is still a voluntary system. However, National Saving Fund scheme can recruit currently only 2 million members of the target group of 30 million population. So the participation rate of 2011 established National Saving Fund are still quite low. So if we calculate the coverage rate of the labor force population who are covered by the additional pension scheme, the rate is still only 38.8%. So only 4 from 10 people working population in Thailand have additional pension on top of government official pension or OH allowance. This is also one challenge for Thai system. Next slide, please. In terms of adequacy of pension benefits, our system still has limitations. The level of OH allowance is still far from the current poverty line. Now, poverty line of Thailand is about 200 to 2,710. Of course, there is no automatic inflation adjustment scheme for adaptively adjusting OH allowance according to the change of price over time. And in addition, there are also a big gap of pension benefits among systems. If you see the amount of pension benefits that each population in each work status, labor status, or occupation receiving, we can see quite different benefits from they have a big gap of benefits. For example, government official pension is comparatively high. The calculation, if you see the formula for calculation, the replacement rate of government official pension is quite near the salary before retirement or 60 months before retirement average salary, but OH allowance is still low at 600 to 1,000 Thai baht per month. So if but at the same time, if the government is too generous to increase OH allowance to poverty line level, this would cause the pension-related government expenditure accounts for 1/4 of the total government expenditure, which will be a huge burden in the future. Next slide, please. Currently, the Thai government is bearing pension-related expenditure in many forms, as shown in this slide. Government pay a lot in pension-related expenditure. If we consider only central government's pension-related expenditure, we can confirm the fact that the government is quite generous to government officials. 33% of total pension-related expenditure go to government officials. Only 17% goes to the non-government pension recipients of older person. However, the total pension-related expenditure has increased more than double in the last 10 years. Next slide, please. Moreover, we can confirm the fact that the speed of pension-related expenses of Thai central government is faster than those of government total expenditure or GDP in last decade. And in addition, if we consider the proportion of government expenditure and comparing with the pension-related government expenditure, it has increased sharply from 10% in 2009 to about 14.5% in 2019. It reflects the fact that this expense has crowded out the other outlay of government expenditure in the last 10 years. However, we still have some good news that we should note that its proportion to GDP keeps on constant, namely 2%. So it reflects the fact that in the future there is some possibility for Thai government to squeeze some resource from GDP in forms of social contribution, saving, or tax burden to finance more in pension-related expense and keeps the proportion to GDP at a certain level. So according to this evidence, in the future, sustainability of Thai pension system will surely become a grand challenge for Thai society. Next slide, please. Okay, I would like to conclude my presentation by mention about the direction of pension reform and some lessons learned from Thai pension system. Currently, there exists many movements of pension reform on both parametric reform of pension schemes or many efforts by the government to introduce new measures into the current system. For example, especially the left-wing NGO or like they would like to increase the old age allowance benefits from 600 Thai baht to 1,000 Thai baht to the level of poverty line, and at the same time, Thai government would like to expand the National Saving Funds target group from only working population, non-employee working population, to children population as well. And at the same time, the Thailand Ministry of Finance would like to introduce the so-called National Pension Fund in order to realize the compulsory provident fund in order to increase the replacement rate of pension of the private sector's employee. These are the recent movement on the pension reform. But I would like to emphasize that although pension in Thailand looks comprehensive, but unfortunately, there exists no single authority or single entity in the government who consider and manage the whole system from the bird's eye view viewpoint. Of course, now, as I mentioned in the beginning of my presentation, we have we have at least 9 fragmented pension system, and it runs like laissez-faire. It might not cost efficiency. So like the coverage, adequacy of pension benefits, fiscal sustainability, and the government should be the policy objective for pension system, but they are trade-off. So we should have something like a single entity to look over the whole system. Next slide, please. So the first priority of reform, Thai current pension system reform, is not only revising individual system like a parametric system or just only introduce new system into into the current one, but we should create the formal platform like national commissions of pension policy, something like that, that considers and directs the blueprints of the country pension system in a holistic way. And now we are on the way to advocate or push the so-called the national commissions of pension policy. Now, our Ministry of Finance has also this draft of bill in the hands in order to pass to the parliament later. So I still have like 3 more slides, but it's only the lesson learned from the pension reform in the past. I will not go in depth because I think I used time over my my time, 20 minutes already. So I would like to stop here, but if you have any questions, you can ask me later in the time of Q&A. Thank you very much for your attention.
Many thanks, Professor Morawet. I think this is really interesting in giving kind of a new perspective for Indonesian pension scheme, and also in line with the development of the from fragmented towards more new solid pension fund in Thailand. I would like to come to the third panelist, Dr. Michael Azimi, so that we can then read all of the question after the presentation of the third panelist. Mr. or Dr. Azimi is the CEO of the member of the board of Sabah Pension Strategies Institute, Iran. He completed his bachelor degree from Economy Faculty, University of Alami Tabay, Tehran, Iran. Then he obtained his Master of Art degree from University of Mazandaran, Iran in 2001, and earned his PhD in economics from University of Pune, India. Prior to his appointment as CEO, he worked as a consultant for Ahangi Atiye Cultural and Art Institution, Social Security Organization, Iran. Dr. Azimi, please, time is yours.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Excellency, dear panelists, dear participants, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy to be here. And first of all, let me thank the organizer of the webinar and thank for having me in very prestigious webinar. To me, it is very pleased to have a chance to share and learn about pension system in other countries and have some idea from colleagues who are in other countries too. Actually, I learned a lot during this webinar yesterday and also today. And I wish I had more time to communicate with dear friends to talk about pension system as a whole. Actually, today I'm going to talk about Iran's experience on pension reform. Of course, there are plenty of issues that we can talk, but we cannot cover all. So let me focus on some points, some key points from Iran's experience. But before going ahead, let me say some few words about who Sabah Pension Strategy Institute is. Actually, the institute, SPSI, is a research body of Civil Servants Pension Fund of Iran. It is established as a research-based body just 4 years ago. So the institute is young. And the major focus of the institute is carrying out research studies about pension system and prepare some advice to the manager of the fund. Till now, we are happy to complete more than 45 research studies, 85 working papers, and publish near 40 books. But before saying some points or key points about the pension reform in Iran, I would like to say a glimpse at pension system of Iran. As you can see in the table, in Iran we have 18 pension funds. 18 pension funds in Iran are working, and the biggest one is Social Security Organization, stands for SSO, and the second biggest is Civil Servant Pension Funds, stands for CSPF. As you can see in the table, CSPF established in 1922, and Social Security Organization established in 1930. So we can say that in Iran we are experiencing near 1 century pension system. Pension system in Iran is not young, but of course we have some young pension funds too. And next slide, please. In terms of member of the pension fund in Iran, the Social Security is the biggest one. Next slide, please. The fourth one, yes. Social Security Organization covered, actually, Social Security Organization has near to 14 million contributor and 4 million pensioner. And the fund which I'm working for, Civil Servants Pension Fund, has near to 1 million contributor and 1.4 pensioners. As you can see, the supporting ratio in Social Security Organization, which is the biggest fund in Iran, is 4, and in Civil Servant Pension Fund is less than 1. The next slide, please. But in terms of covered people, the people who are covered by the fund, near to 45 or 44 million people are covered by one organization, which is Social Security Organization in Iran. And near to 1.5 million people are covered by CSPF, which is Civil Servant Pension Fund in Iran. In total, near to 60 million people are covered by pension system in Iran, out of 85. Okay, and as you can see in the table, 84% of covered people are covered just by 2 funds, and the rest funds cover the rest. And as I mentioned before, almost 70% of population are covered by the pension system in Iran. Next slide, please. In this graph, you can see the coverage expansion of pension fund in Iran. In 1971, just 29% of total population of the country were covered by the system, but in 2014 it reached to 70%. But in terms of old age people, unfortunately, near to 45% of old age are not still covered by the pension system, and just 55% of old age people in Iran has no pension fund, pension benefit in Iran. In terms of next slide, please. In terms of contribution rate, you can see in the next slide. Yes, in this table you can see the contribution rate divided by employee, employer, and government, and total. It varies between the funds, but the major funds were the SSO and CSPF. The total contribution rate is 30 and 22.5, but it varies. Almost they are between 20 and 30. For more details about the pension system in Iran, please go to the report which is available on website of sahabatpsi.ir. My colleagues prepared a full report about pension system in Iran. You can find out more details about supporting ratio and adequacy rates and pension formulas, covered people, and major articles, a major regulation in different pension funds in Iran. So, if you are interested to know more about pension system in Iran, you can find out some information in this report. Next slide, please. But let me share some points about the pension system limitation in Iran, or some experience about reform of the system in Iran. The major or the biggest problem of the pension system in Iran is unsustainability, fiscal unsustainability. We are facing severe fiscal unsustainability in pension system in Iran. As you can see, it is very fast increase. You can see in the graph, it started from 45% to near to 50% of social welfare budget of government. Without help of government, without finance of government, pension system in Iran is not able to work at all. Next slide, please. Due to fiscal unsustainability, severe unsustainability, actually, we need to implement some reform. Fortunately, during last years, there is no doubt about reform. When I am saying last year, I mean 10 years. It is more than one decade that in Iran we are talking about reform, because we have few problems with full coverage. We can have full coverage with minor reform in some regulation. We have good system in terms of different categories of benefits. So we can say that in comprehensiveness, we are okay. But as I mentioned before, the major one, sustainability of the system and adequacy of the benefit. In two major pension funds in Iran, adequacy rate is less than 50. If you compare the benefit, amount of the benefit with the poverty line, it comes to less than 50%. Besides, in Iran, the cost of the scheme are high compared to other schemes in other countries. And we have plenty of difficulties in terms of good governance. So we can say the pension system in Iran after 1 century is going to fail. So there is no doubt about the necessity of the reform. Next slide, please. When you are talking about reform in Iran, managers and experts use some concept for introducing reform. Or when you are talking different kind of reform in Iran, we use parametric reform, structural, which are common, and you can hear about organizational reform or operational reform, or changing the system to multi-pillar system. As I mentioned just a few minutes before, we are talking about the reform more than 1 decade, but nothing happened. Nothing happened. no regulation change. No regulation. The regulation is same as those were in 30 years, 50 years back. And so I think there is very big question here. Why? No reform when you are talking about the necessity of the reform for more than 1 decade. And to me, it is very clear because pension reform is not a just technical issue. It is political, social, economical, financial, etc. We have to solve a different equation. We cannot focus just on one equation and solve it and consider we can solve entire the system. Based on Iran's experience, pension reform is a very long journey. We cannot do any reform in a very short time. We could be very powerful in communicating different fields. But when you come to reform in Iran's experience, as I mentioned, when you go to office or organization and talk with managers and expertise, they mention on parametric reform, structural reform, organizational and operational. But the thing is that the merit of each one, possibility of each one, and impact of each one on sustainability, which is the major problem of pension system in Iran. So when we are talking or thinking about which parameter should be changed, what is the structural changes, which operations or which process should be changed, we should consider the merits, possibility, and the final impact on the sustainability. Next slide, please. I can give you one example from CSPF, which is Civil Servants Pension Fund of Iran. We tried to calculate the impact of each reform on the fund. If we optimize the current DB system of the fund, the final impact on the deficit of the fund is just 37%. If we could set a multiplier system inside the CSPF, it decreased just 6% of the deficit. If we could add new members to the fund, near to 1 million people, it decreased just 11% of the deficit. If we could do all reform in CSPF, at the end of our trial, as you can see, 46% of deficit remains. So after revolutionary reform in one fund, near 50% of the problem is there. So, as I mentioned, merits, possibility, and final impact of reform is very, very important to make the decision about what type of reform is needed. Next slide, please. In terms of investment in CSPF, NPV of assets is near to 250,000 billion Iran's rial. If you compare the NPV of the asset with the liability of the CSPF, it comes to 2.5%. Just 2.5%. I always mention to my colleagues, if you hire very good manager, the first one in the world to manage the asset, he could or she could double the NPV. So after that, it comes to just 5% of the liability. So in terms of Iran's experience, the investment performance cannot solve the unsustainability alone. We need something more. I would like to emphasize here that everything in pension fund comes to calculation. We need numbers, figures. We have to decide, we have to take the approach which is evidence-based, as mentioned in previous lectures today and yesterday too. Next slide, please. As mentioned in previous lecture too, about multi-pillar system, in Iran, social protection system divided to two sides. One side is non-contributory, which is so-called social assistance, and the second one is contributory, which is social insurance. As mentioned in one slide before, in Iran we have 18 pension funds or organizations in contributory side. And in social assistance, we have 3 governmental organizations, 6 public foundations, and so many NGOs and charities. And unfortunately, there is no third pillar in Iran. We have no private pension fund. Recently, some banks, some commercial insurance companies started to introduce some scheme. They called every scheme pension scheme, but actually they are not. They are just commercial insurance. They are not pension. So we can say, although in Iran we have 2 wings of social protection, we don't have the third layer. And the most important things in this slide, in this field, 2 sides of the pension system in Iran, non-contributory and contributory side, are not integrated under one system. As my friend mentioned in Thai experience, also in Iran, we are suffering of lacking one body who is thinking about the entire system. You take my word, without efficient, effective, non-contributory system, pension scheme is not successful at all. For having effective and efficient contributory or pension system, we need to have efficient and effective non-contributory system too. And for having so, we need some system which integrated all these 2 beside third layer, which is private pension system. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm running the time. Just few words about lesson learned from Iran. Unfortunately, we have hyperinflation and special structural wages in Iran, which is not okay for having good saving during working time. And unfortunately, based on the evidence, based on the calculation, like many other countries, the most source of old age income in Iran is just pension. Many old age people in Iran don't have other source of income. They rely on just pension. Besides, taxing system does not support saving during working time, during working period, especially for long-term decision. Therefore, adequacy of pension in Iran is reflection of inadequate wages during working time. By this point, I would like to emphasize on the relation between adequacy of the wages during working time with adequacy of pension during old age. They have some relation. So we can, when we are thinking about adequacy of pension, we need to think about adequacy of wages before. Next slide, please. As mentioned before, we are suffering from serious fragmentation in policy making. The major point in my idea is no voice of informal sector in policy making departments at all. When you are talking, or when you are thinking about pension system in a country, we have to actually, in my idea, we must listen to informal sector. Without participation of informal sector, the system at the end of the day going to fail. And I prepared some more points, but just let me focus just 2 points more, and the rest will be in the Q&A session. I would like to focus or mention just on the myth of lack of budget. In many countries, managers or politicians say we don't have enough money to support needy people. But based on the calculation, as my colleagues in Savo Pension Institute calculated, as ILO calculated for 57 low-income countries. You can find out the report of ILO on the website. Just few percentage of GDP is okay for support or prepare basic support for the entire population. Between 2% to 7% of GDP is enough for having a basic layer of protection for entire people. Last slide, please, because I'm going to mention just the final points. Based on Iran's experience during my career, I can suggest to my dear colleague in this webinar, when we are thinking about pension reform, we need a model for social protection first. We need to decide which protection model is needed for specific country in specific period of time. Because the model shows us who are participating and how much, and who are taking something from the system, when, under which the criteria, and what are the relation between different bodies in the system. As I mentioned before, without strong and effective social assistance layer, no social insurance layer. And the complementary element for having good or productive social protection is social budgeting. Basic tool to implement any social protection model, in my idea, is social budgeting, which is in Iran is lacking. We don't think in this way in Iran. After more than 1 decade, I can suggest you, when you are thinking about pension reform, please consider a model for entire the country and connect the model with social budgeting. And the last, not the least, national inclusive participation is a must in any type of social protection model. Of course, as I mentioned in the beginning, there are plenty issues about pension reform, but I tried to mention some key points based on Elon's experience, and I hope I have another time, another chance to communicate with you and learn about other countries' experience too. Thank you very much, and the time is yours, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Azimi. Now, we have a complete set of understanding about the three different countries' experience in managing the pension system. I would like to raise or pointed out three main questions that we can already gather from the participants. First of all, I would like to ask Professor Morawet. It is from Professor Aris Ananta, Prof. So the first two questions for you is actually, how do you calculate the old age allowance and what are the criteria? And then also how the government can invest the contribution profitably. Another question for Professor Morawet is from Fajar, Rahmat Fajar and Rika Haryati. From the funds management perspective, is it better for the pension fund to be managed by various designated institutions? As you already mentioned that you have 9 pillars in Thailand. And how about uniting into one pension institution? I think that's the first session for question answer to Professor Morawet. Please, Prof.
Okay, thank you very much for interesting question. I would like to answer the first question from Professor Alice Ananta first about the calculation of OH allowance benefits. Truthfully speaking, there's still no criteria for its calculation. It's just fiscally affordable amount. It's something like incrementalism. In the past, it was 200 Thai baht per month. It has been increased to 300, 500, and then to 600 to 1,000 Thai baht. Just that. But in order to find some criteria, I think it's still debatable among academicians and many stakeholders. For example, we do agree, we altogether do agree to adjust the amount of OH allowance by considering something like inflation. We should adjust adaptively according to the change of price. But in order to define absolute value, someone may say we should raise it to the poverty line level. But at the same time, I may argue that we should consider something like the other types of older person support as well. You may know that in Thailand, we also have the so-called universal health security scheme. All of Thai population will be covered universally in terms of health security by at least 3 health security systems. I will not go in depth in details. So what I want to say is that the older person has been already supported about for the like a medical expense already. So more or less it should be if you set poverty line level as as the like a benchmark, you may subtract like a medical expense covered by universal health security scheme from that amount as well. Something we should think like this way. And last year the Thai government has, decentralized the caregiver mission to local authorities. And now the dependent older person can be able to receive care services at home. So we have launched the home care services already. Now the local authorities are able to employ caregiver to take care of older person in the community. So the older person has not to pay anything about that. So now in order to determine the level of old age allowance, we should calculate something like that as well. But now the amount is, as I mentioned, fiscally affordable amount. And for, I think Professor Anand, Alice has also the question on the investment of
Yes,
the contribution in order to get higher profit as well. As far as I understand, and as far as I know, the development of the investment style of Thailand's pension fund, for example, a social security fund. Of course, we have the same issue in the past as in case of Indonesia, because the pension fund in the past it is a part of a governmental organization. So portfolio was very traditional. They invest in like a saving account, or they buy like a government bond, something like that. But if we consider the evolution from the past until nowadays of Social Security Fund, the portfolio has been diversified to like financial investment at international level, or it can be invested in gold fund, something like that. So the regulation on financial investment has been conducted by the government. And at the same time, Social Security Fund also outsource the fund management to like a private financial asset management firm as well. Not only the financial team of Social Security office, but they outsource the private firm to manage the private pension fund. So they basing on that style of investment, they can increase the higher profit. And I think I see the, one more question on the chat about the like a socioeconomic impact after the pension reform in 2009. Truthfully speaking, I have there is no research on that, but because it is a cash transfer that directly allocated to the older person, to all older person. So it has more or less impact on reducing poverty rate. But I don't think that it is powerful in minimizing income inequality among older person or among generations, because like the richer become richer, but the older person get only like peanuts, just 600 Thai baht per month is very few. But of course, if we consider the effect on poverty, more or less it can reduce poverty rate, but not relative poverty. I think that's all I have been asked in the chat.
Thank you, Professor Borawan. Okay. My second question that we gathered is actually to Bapak Isa and Dr. Azimi. It's about the investment as well, but we would like to link into BPJS TK or Indonesian pension system. It is from Pak Ari Wibowo. Should BPJS or the pension system, like social pension system, apply aggressive investment strategy? Given the condition in Indonesia currently, we allow the participant to make an early withdrawal. It is special to Bapak Isa, and also I would like to ask Dr. Azimi comment about this because with regard to the investment and also the sustainability of the system, what do you think in the aspect of the managing the aggressive investment strategy compared to the mismatch problem or the short-term perspective due to the allowance or the system that currently open for early withdrawals? Itu Bapak Isa and Dr. Azimi.
Okay, thank you, Pak Adi, and thank you for Pak Ari Wibowo for the question. I'm not an expert on the investment myself, but I would like to try to give some insight on this issue. First of all, the early withdrawal is something that we regret to exist in our system. But it does exist. So we have to manage the consequence carefully. As I understand, BPJS Ketenagakerjaan has made some statistics, some experience records to understand the pattern of this early withdrawal. In a normal situation, while the economy is fine, the early withdrawal is actually a very low rate. In that situation, I think the investment can be a little bit more progressive for more portion. Of course, we cannot put all the investment in an aggressive strategy. Yet, with the experience, I believe BPJS Ketenagakerjaan may estimate the portion that can put in a very conservative strategy, and as well as the other part that can be invested more aggressively. So, in essence, I would suggest that some mixed strategy should be observed, monitored, and implement from time to time. And of course, the portion should be adjusted according to the situation. I think that's my view, Pak Adi, on the question of Pak Ari Wibowo.
Thank you, Bapak Isa. Dr. Azimi, do you have any comment about the investment strategy and also the managing the early withdrawals and all that?
Sorry, you are asking about the
investment strategy of the pension fund.
Okay.
The investment, yes.
Yeah. Same here, like my colleague. I'm not an investment person in fund myself. But when we are talking about the investment in pension funds, I prefer to start with this point that investment is not the first business of a pension fund. It is a tool to prepare or find some resource to cover the liability, just that. Especially when you are in social layer, I mean the compulsory social layer of pension or in a social protection system. I mean, consider a multiplier system, first layer, second, and third. When you are in first or second layer of protection system, investment is not the first business of the model, as I mentioned. But we need money. We need money to cover the benefits. Without that, we are not successful at all. We need money. That's why we have to think about the investment first. The second thing, let me refer to Iran's experience. As I mentioned in my presentation, developing countries like Iran are facing different barriers for investment. Mostly high inflation. In Iranian context, we are suffering super high inflation for 3 or 4 decades. And to me, inflation is stealing the value of the asset of the fund. Actually, I can say inflation has been stealing the value of the asset of the fund. In this situation, when you come to investment, we are facing very difficult problems. But besides general issues, general consideration about the best strategy for a pension fund, I would like to add something on this issue. That because of the because of the period which the pension fund work in, we should think about very long term period. When you are an investment company, you can decrease the timeline and pick up the best strategy for investment. But for pension fund, we should think very long time. In terms of CSPF, Civil Servant Pension Fund of Iran, every single case which is entered to the fund continues for 75 years. Any record enters to the fund keep going for 75 years. So we should think about for 75, which investment strategy is okay for this long-term period. That's why we should think very carefully. And as my friend mentioned before, the best thing is the combination of these strategies. We cannot focus on just one strategy. And there is no tailor-made model for investment at all. Based on my experience, based on many studies, we should consider the situation of single fund and pick up the best mixture of the strategy for the investment. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Azaimi. I have a privilege as a moderator to pick one question each for each panelist now, because due to the timing. First of all, I would like to ask Professor Borawet. I pick the question from Pak Agung Widyadi. Based on the pension reform in Thailand, 2009, has there been any significant impact in reducing the poverty rate and minimizing the income inequality after the reform? That for Professor Borawet. And I would like to ask Bapak Isa and Dr. Azimi with the same question. What is the potential of Sharia pension fund in Indonesia, Bapak Isa? And then for Dr. Azami, could you explain on the Sharia pension system in Iran and how its development and probably the suggestion for the reform in the future? Please, Professor Borawet.
Because the pension reform in 2009, the OH allowance has been allocated to all older persons except the one who were receiving government officials' pension or receiving salary from a governmental organization. So it directly increased the catch of the older person. So it had a direct effect on reducing poverty rate in Thailand during that time, but it did not minimize or it did not decrease the income inequality, because the amount of money that has been additionally increased to the older person is very few, because before that the amount of OH allowance was 500 baht. So the government, the older person get additionally only 100 Thai baht per month, or only $3. So it has no, power to, change the income inequality, but more or less it reduces poverty rate. Thank you.
Bapak Isa probably would like to answer about the potential of Sharia pension system in Indonesia, Pak, please.
Well, this is something that we can always provide a prospective answer, Pak Adi. If we consider the size of the Muslim population in Indonesia, of course, we will say that this is very prospective. Okay, but we should also look at our experience with the Sharia banking, with the Sharia insurance, that in practice, the development of those two industries are not really as fast as we expected before when we started to develop the industry. So I think if we like to realize the potentials that are in Indonesia, I think we should prepare better for the development of the Sharia pension scheme, so that we will not start as a trial. Rather, we really prepare, and then we include the education as part of the development plan, and then we also do some efforts to socialize, to start to jumpstart the development, something like that. So I would say that in short, I would say that this is not something that we can just say, but rather we should prepare very, very well to make the potentials realized in practice. Thank you.
Many thank you, Pak Isa. Dr. Azimi, would you like to explain a bit more on the closing about the pension fund system in the Iran with regard to the Sharia system?
That is a very challenging and debatable question before Muslim country, not just for Iran or Indonesia. Of course, Indonesia is the biggest Muslim country in the world. And actually, I'm not a specialist, and I don't have enough knowledge to answer the right answer to the question. Let me seize the opportunity to share a point of view. In terms of Iran's experience, we had Islamic Revolution 40 years ago. We tried to build up a country based on Sharia. And after 40 years, we have experience. So when we are talking about protection systems, social protection system, or when we are talking about pension system in Iran, we can study the experience. What happened to the first idea and what we have now? What happened? What was the reason to the journey from the first idea to what we have now today? That is the first one. Actually, I am suggesting to young participants to study about the experience of Iran from this point of view. And the second thing, let me mention in that, yes, in Iran, Sharia has some impact on social protection system. We cannot ignore it at all. But based on my knowledge, it is not considered in formal bureaucracy of the country. Those who want to participate based on Sharia regulations, they participate in non-governmental organizations. And of course, there is a huge resource over there. And when we are talking about social protection, social pension, maybe it jumps to our mind that, okay, there is huge resource somewhere in the country. Is it okay to connect the resource to formal social protection system? Actually, if you are asking me, I prefer not. Because when the money, the resource is in non-governmental organization, charity, NGOs, and so on, the resources are used more efficient than governmental bodies. That's why I prefer to keep separate NGOs, charities from governmental bodies. Of course, as I mentioned, when you thinking about social protection, we need to think on a model which put every part of the social protection in the country. Of course, one element in that model is NGOs and charities. But I prefer to keep charities, Sharia based on Sharia Islamic charities, non-governmental body of the model, not mixture, not seizing the money from NGOs and charity to governmental. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Azimi. I think this is to conclude our discussion today. I would like to use this opportunity to also have one closing statement. First of all, after we are discussing and appreciating the development of the managing pension system in Thailand, in Indonesia, and in Iran, I do appreciate that we currently really witness about the potential of the improvement is really still huge. And we are all committed to do some reforms. We need to do what we should do. One among other things is to improve the coverage, the participation, the management of the investment of the system, and also make the affordable contribution from all of the people that can be contributed into the system. Last but not least is also to develop the sustainable program. I do believe with the close synergy and collaboration, we can still also exchange views and knowledge continuously, and even following up the more discussion later on to improve the system of pension in Indonesia, in Iran, and in Thailand. Thank you so much. This is really a great time for all of us, and I would like to give back the time to the Master of Ceremony. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Pak Hadi, Pak Professor Worawet, and Dr. Azimi for the incredible insights and the knowledge that's been shared to all of us. And now, ladies and gentlemen, finally our session of the panel discussion is done. But before we close the webinar today, I would like to invite Bapak Kunta Nugraha, Assistant of Minister of Finance for Public Expenditure, to deliver the concluding remarks for today's seminar. Bapak Kunta, you are welcome to give the concluding remarks.
Thank you, moderator, MC, and Pak Hadi as the moderator. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon. May peace be upon us all. So, distinguished speaker, panelists, ladies and gentlemen, let me begin by thanking the panelists. This is Pak Isa Rahmatawarta as the Director General of State Asset Management, and Professor Worawet Suwanranda from Chulalongkorn University from Thailand, and Dr. Mikhail Azimi, CEO and member on the board of Sahabat Pension Strategies Institute in Iran. And the participant, the panelists and the participant for this fruitful and constructive webinar. I am confident that at the end of this webinar series, you know that we had 2-day seminar, the capacities and knowledge of various parties dealing with the pension issues will be even more solid. The pension system must be viewed as a whole, bearing in mind the impact of pension reform on macroeconomics, employee welfare, and financial deepening. Thank you for sparing your valuable time to participate in this 2-day international webinar on pension system. I'm sure you are aware now that Indonesia is currently implementing a multi-pillar pension system, which is expected to provide broader and equitable benefit to society. However, there are several major challenges faced by the existing multi-pillar pension system in Indonesia. Most notably, the current system is characterized by the absence of pension program for informal workers and the disharmony between mandatory contribution and voluntary programs. In this case, as almost all informal workers, which account for 53% of the total workers, are not covered by any retirement income protection program. There is also the issue of weak enforcement within the formal workers, as only less than 40% of formal workers are covered by this protection program. This is mentioned by Askolani and Pak Isa before. These issues, among others, become the contributing factors in the relatively low pension funds asset, which in turn contribute to a shallow and unstable financial sector, as well as a limited support for quality and sustainable economic growth. On this note, I would like to point out that size of pension fund industry in Indonesia is still relatively low, around 5.63% of GDP. Like Pak Isa mentioned before, this fact highlights the urgency of a pension system reform in Indonesia. In theory, there is no one-size-fits-all pension system. The pension system design and framework of a country is tailored to the characteristic of that country. However, there are general features that are keys to the successful implementation of pension programs. The ability to identify the common thread within different frameworks of national pension system across countries will become the basis for implementing pension reform, like Pak Horawet and Pak Azimi mentioned before. In addition, another critical factor in the development of pension fund industry is the management of pension funds. Institutional arrangement and investment policies for pension program are just two of the fundamental factors that determine whether the pensions program objective of providing a better retirement income protection can be achieved. Therefore, strengthening pension fund institutional arrangement, both mandatory and voluntary, as well as ensuring prudent investment policies, are some of the measures needed to ensure that pension fund management is aimed at providing optimum benefit for participants. So, Bapak Ibu, ladies and gentlemen, once again, I would like to appreciate your participation and contribution during this event by focusing on the topic of the ecosystem and pension yesterday webinar, and on the issue of management of pension funds today. I believe we have discussed the prerequisites and building blocks of a good pension system. The outcome of this discussion will become a strategic input for the Indonesian government and related authorities in designing and implementing our pension system reform agenda. So thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Makasih.
Thank you, Pak Kunta, for the concluding remarks that perfectly wraps up our series of webinar on pension system. So, ladies and gentlemen, finally our event has come to an end. But once again, just as a final reminder, I would like to remind you that all participants of this webinar who have registered, please also fill in our feedback form to the given link, as you can see on the screen. And the e-certificate will be issued for all participants who have registered and also who have filled in the feedback form. And you can also download all the materials from all our speakers today to the given link on the screen. And ladies and gentlemen, I would like to express my gratitude and appreciation to all our remarkable speakers today for taking their time to attend this event. Also, thank you so much to all participants for participating in this event with such an incredible enthusiasm. I hope you find this webinar beneficial, and also I hope it brings you tremendous in-depth knowledge, especially on the matters relating the pension system and pension fund as a whole. Also, I personally, and in the capacity of the organizers, would like to apologize for any shortcomings during the event. I'm Lisa Angelia signing off. Thank you so much. May all of you have a wonderful day. Selamat siang. Terima kasih. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.